This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey there, Chuck Holton here. If you missed the first half of the interview with Gordon Chang on China and how China is intentionally trying to kill Americans, you want to go back and watch the previous podcast and listen to that. But this is the second half of that interview, and I tell you what, it is powerful. This is an amazing story that is not being reported in the news. And so you definitely want to not only listen to it, but you want to like it, share it, and get it out there to your friends, because the world needs to know what China is doing. They're intentionally killing American citizens, intentionally working to rot America from the inside out, engaging in full court press to destroy America. And they're doing so with help, unfortunately, from our own government. So listen to Gordon Chang right now, the second half of our interview, and thanks for watching.
Oh, wow. Well, since you brought it up, let's talk about the rolling power outages for a second. I just read that they are shutting down their magnesium smelters, and that's where we get our magnesium for our aluminum industry. Is that going to have an effect on the United States?
I'm sure it will. I mean, at least in the short term, it'll drive up prices. Mm-hmm. China right now is trying to dig as much coal and import coal as fast as they can, so as to alleviate this, because this obviously affects their economy. But we are going to see dislocations. And remember, right now, we've got extraordinary supply chain disruptions around the world, not just because of China's rolling power outages, but also because of their COVID-19 lockdowns, misguided policies on both sides of the Pacific. But this is not just China and the US. We got disruptions elsewhere around the world as well. So this is one of those times where we're starting to see, it might be a good idea to manufacture some stuff on this side of the Pacific, so that we don't have to go through this. And also, just one other thing, the Biden administration tells us that climate change is the world's #1 national security threat. Well, if you really, really believe that, then you shouldn't have these supply chains that stretch halfway around the world. You should be making stuff closer to home so that your factories are closer to your point of consumption, which means you drastically reduce the carbon that you put in the air as you transport this stuff around. So it seems to me that if climate change is something you're really concerned about, then you should be saying, bring back our factories.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I read the other day that 80% of the cost of the vegetables that you eat is in the transportation. If they grew them closer to the market, then it'd be a lot better for the environment and cheaper.
And 15 of the world's largest container ships put as much carbon dioxide into the air as all the world's cars.
Wow. Amazing. So let's turn to a more sort of malevolent and nefarious issue with China, and that is their intentional pushing of fentanyl into the United States through our southern border. Tell me about your article you wrote with that. I found that very interesting.
The fentanyl is a synthetic compound that is made by Chinese technicians, and they change the compound all the time so that they can avoid detection as it comes across our border. And of course, they make it more lethal. What's happening is the Chinese fentanyl gangs are international. They're far-flung. They have very big operations. In China's near total surveillance state, they can't operate without the blessing of the Communist Party. I mean, just to give you an example, they launder their money through Chinese state banks. China knows exactly what's going on. So when they sell fentanyl, you have to assume that this is Communist Party policy. And by the way, Beijing has protected its fentanyl gangs from US law enforcement efforts. So clearly this is, we had maybe 53,000 fentanyl deaths last year in America. The number is up in the air, but it's tens of thousands, maybe 53,000. Well, we should consider each of those deaths a murder, because China wanted Americans dead, and it got its wish. Now, you talked about the southern border. because of the pressure on our southern border. U.S. Customs and Border Protection doesn't have the ability. They're handling all the migrants, so they don't have the ability to go after the drug cartels. They sneak the stuff in. It's coming in across our southern border in record quantities. And we should be saying, every time someone says fentanyl, we should be saying China. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
So are the precursor chemicals coming from China and the fentanyl's being mixed in Mexico, or is it actually being made into fentanyl in China and then sent straight to the United States?
Both, but increasingly it's the ingredients are exported to a place like Mexico, mixed and then brought across the border. And by the way, these fentanyl gangs are operating not just on our southern border, but on our northern border as well, specifically Vancouver, where they've set up shop.
And I mean, they're saying that this year there could be, they don't really even know how many deaths from fentanyl there will be, but could be 70,000 or more.
Well, yeah, the reason why there is so much vagueness in these numbers is that it's not just deaths from fentanyl. It's deaths, increasingly fentanyl mixed with methamphetamines and with cocaine. And that's where the biggest increase in fentanyl deaths are, in the mixing with other substances. So the numbers are imprecise, but in any event, Chuck, we're talking tens of thousands of Americans each year. Maybe, as they said, 53,000, a figure I saw. Could be a little bit less, could be the 70,000 you mentioned, but any number greater than zero is unacceptable.
Yeah, it's an act of war. And so that brings me to our last question, which is, what is the state of the Chinese military now in comparison to the U.S. military? If we had to go to war with China today, would we come out on top?
We don't know. I mean, everyone will tell you that in the tabletop exercises the Pentagon conducts, we always lose. China's military is bigger. It's not as capable as ours, but we've got to remember that we've got global responsibilities. So our military, which is smaller than China's, is stretched. China can bring to bear more assets than we can, let's say, across the Taiwan Strait or elsewhere. There's a couple of other things, though, that we don't normally talk about, and that is, for China to go to war, Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, has got to give some general or admiral almost total control of the Chinese military, which makes that flag officer the most powerful figure in China. Xi Jinping is not about to do that. Also, we know that the People's Liberation Army is not a state army. It reports to the Communist Party. And as such, it has two reporting lines. It has a military reporting line, and it has a political reporting line. And the political one can be, and most of the time is, more important. So you have a military which is not really that well organized. Now, they have made some very important moves to try to create jointness with their reorganization of the military a half decade ago. They, in some ways, their organization chart is better than ours, especially when it comes to space and fighting in low Earth orbit. But, it is a military which has not proven to be effective. Vietnam in 1979 kicked the crap out of China with its third string army, and with China with its first. Also, India has been acquitting itself very well in Ladakh, high in the Himalayas. And one other thing, Chuck, we know that China's political establishment is even more casualty averse than ours. So I'm not if you look at their weapons, they're really good. You look at their size, it scares us. But in terms of capability, we really don't know how good they are in a fight.
And so, yeah, I mean, that if you say that they're more risk averse than our military, that's saying something, because our military has gotten incredibly risk averse since in the last 5 years or so, just from my.
Let me just give you a quick example. Mm-hmm. Night of June 15th last year, China, in a surprise attack, killed 20 Indian soldiers in Ladakh. What happened was India thought it killed a lot of Chinese. It was only in February of this year that China admitted 4 deaths. But India believes it was more like 45. And TASS, the Russian news agency, a couple of weeks ago came out with an article that said it was indeed 45 Chinese troops were killed. China's only admitted to 4. That shows you how sensitive the Communist Party is, because I think most Chinese people, although they like a strong China, they'd like, but they're just not in any mood to go out and some military misadventure abroad. Communist Party knows it.
Interesting. I found it really fascinating that almost as soon as we got wheels up from Afghanistan, Chinese hackers were wheels down at Bagram to start going through all the computers that we left behind. What do you think will be the long-term consequences of all of that information that we left on the ground in Afghanistan?
Certainly that is going to hurt us. What really hurt us was the chaotic nature of the withdrawal. We emboldened China, we emboldened North Korea, we emboldened Iran, we emboldened Russia. But even more important, we disheartened our friends and allies, especially India, a country that we will need. The pro-American Indian analysts and officials in New Delhi have been delegitimized by the way we left Afghanistan, and the pro-Russians have been strengthened. This is going to have consequences that it's going to take the Biden administration certainly years. And even if Biden gets a second term, he will not repair the damage that has occurred because of this.
I agree. There's going to be a lot of long-term consequences, ripple effect of this whole thing. As a matter of fact, I'll see that this coming week when I go to Syria and see an emboldened Erdogan pushing troops into Turkey. From Turkey into Syria. So anyway, thank you very much for your time. That's all the time we've got for today. Gordon Chang has some amazing books, and folks, if you haven't read some of his books and articles, you really need to get a hold of them. It's a real privilege to have him on the show today. And again, Gordon G. Chang on Twitter, and so you can follow him there. Anything else you'd like to say?
I just want to say it's been a real privilege talking to you, Chuck. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
God bless you.
All right.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.